Batman Arkham Asylum. I had never finished this game when I played it the first time when I picked it up, but it was actually fairly chill to play through for the most part. Day one, we finished this in 2 days. I really think this is the type of game you want to play over more than 2 days, or you will start to resent it. I thought this was pretty good. I think when it came out, it was actually really well received and shit like that. So I was pretty pleased to try it myself. This game is only £4 on Steam as of the next couple of days, so I thought I'll pick it up again. When I first bought it the first time, I bought it for the PlayStation 3. I didn't get very far. I think I got to not even one of the first bosses, so we were thinking about playing something, and so we decided to try it this week. I'm glad we did, honestly. I like kind of short, sharp games that we can kind of bang out on stream. I think this game was pretty good. I don't know if anybody's going to be looking for a review at this point, but I'll give you guys my thoughts nonetheless, just because we're making it a habit and it's good practice for me. But this game is pretty good. If anybody's played any of the modern Spider-Man games, the combat of this game, which obviously came first, is pretty reminiscent of Spider-Man. Spider-Man's reminiscent of this, and Spider-Man is obviously really good. I feel like this game is obviously older though, and it shows its age a little bit. So if you've played Spider-Man first and then you come back to this, I feel like you're going to maybe not enjoy it as much, but again, everybody's different. I don't know. I feel like when you start the game, it's pretty fun to learn the combat, and the game is very well paced in the first half. So you have this kind of nice blend between exploration, you get some bat tools, you feel great when you're fighting, there's some nice cutscenes, there's some nice animations. For a Batman fan, it's good to get a nice view of you get a nice kind of introduction to some of the villains, so particularly, in particular, I think Bane, Scarecrow, Poison Ivy, obviously the Joker is a big part of it, and then some other kind of side villains along the way. I do feel though, in the second half though, I was just really pushing through this game to get it done faster though, and I wonder if other people will be the same. I felt like the second half was miserable. They kept making you go back to the same locations for like no reason. Like there was a time when Poison Ivy's plants first appeared, they made you go back into one of the buildings that you were in just not too long ago. You had to go through the building with your new repel tool, which was kind of cool, I guess, to practice that, and it was very fluid to use the repel tool. But then you just speak to the guy and then you leave again, and then it's like, mate, you made me come all the way in here for nothing, which was a bit of a pain. Some of the mechanics in this game, in terms of the like knowing where to go, can be a bit of a pain sometimes. For the most part, it's alright. Again, I felt like I had no problems navigating where to go in the first half of the game. But then the second half, there were times where I had to look up online a couple of times because there was a hidden door in the tower, or the footprints on the floor, or the DNA that you were tracking was like a lot more obscure than it was beforehand. Again, that could just be me, and again, you might not even notice that if you play this with enough breaks so that it doesn't annoy you, but I started getting a bit fucking, I was just like... Anyways, a couple of the boss fights were cool. The Poison Ivy boss fight, I guess, was kind of cool, but it's very, very simplistic kind of boss fights. A lot of this game is just spawning hundreds of enemies, and then there's a couple of big brutes. When you fight Bane the first time, it's a unique instance, because Bane charges at you, you have to dodge, you throw the Batarang at him, he runs into a wall, you rinse and repeat, and then for the rest of the game, there's a lot of those fights that are like that. So, although this game can be appraised and loved for when it came out and what it provided when it came out, this kind of unique Batman gameplay that was actually really fun and made you feel really empowered, don't get lost in the reviews that give this game like 10 out of 10 or whatever, because the gameplay is very kind of stale as you get through it. Like once you do the first couple of fights, you know what the whole game's going to be like. Even right at the end when you're fighting against Joker, the final fight, you know yourself it's just the same as that you've done the whole game. But that doesn't mean it's not enjoyable, it just means that it's a bit repetitive in a way, and there's not a lot of like innovation in terms of the later boss fights as you play through. But still, this game's pretty chill for the most part. I like all the Riddler secrets that are dotted about everywhere. The puzzles are kind of fairly simple and straightforward, but it gives you some extra content to do instead of just making it, a single playthrough where you're just following the rails. You can actually kind of go off the beaten path, and as you upgrade your tools, you can go back to areas, which is kind of nice. So overall, I feel like, again, for its time, this Batman game's pretty good. I think it's worth, a $5 or whatever if you can ever grab it on sale. If you're looking for an easy 11 hours to throw away, it's pretty chill. The fighting is fun in the beginning. I started getting annoying when they started adding extra enemies to the combat, though. They're trying to diversify it, which is kind of what I've just kind of critiqued the game for not doing enough. But they add in enemies with like tasers, and they add in enemies with knives. You can't just combo those guys like you can combo the normal enemies though, and I feel like it does really disrupt the combat fluidity. as you get through the game, you get better at the combat, or most people is. I was pretty shit even by the end, and I kept pushing the wrong buttons. But it kind of, I don't know, some of the enemies they put in at the end, they were just like, they weren't like, oh, here's an enemy that I need to like dance around and dodge or whatever. It was just like a nuisance. And once those guys were gone, you actually felt that you could go back to having fun again by beating up the rest of the regular dudes. That was just my impression. I don't know. Not anything, you know, super negative to point out, but I don't know. Some of the later enemies were a bit fucking made the combat feel a little bit less fluid, and ultimately I think that's what you want in this game. You want it to be fluid. You want it to be streamlined. You want to have a good story, which again the game kind of gives you. A couple of things didn't really make sense at some points, like when you're running away from Croc in the sewers and then the gate shuts. It's like, all right, okay, who shut the gate? Did we get to know that? Is that important? No. Tiny little detail. If you're fighting against like when you were fighting against Scarecrow, apparently there was a bit in the middle where it was like, oh, you can dodge Joker's bullet, but then it continues the game anyway, and I'm like, well, the game gave me a hint. The game told me I was dead, which is meant to happen, and then you continue on. But then it gave me a hint tool saying, please dodge Joker's bullet. So I don't know what was going on with some of that stuff. Maybe if you play through a second and third time, you can get to mess around with that. Maybe there's some extra scenes or something. I don't know. But for the most part, I'm glad we finished this. Definitely don't play it in a big chunk like I did. You will start to get a bit perturbed, I think. But again, I'm pretty impatient. So good game. Fairly good for the money we spent on it. And I hope that anybody else who plays it enjoys it too. Pretty fun Batman game. Definitely think this is important for paving the way for, again, the more modern games that we've seen where the combat feels really good. It's like this, but like up a couple of levels. This should still be respected for, you know, laying the groundwork and the foundations for that. So, GG's.